Yeah, Frank, I'm happy to. I think this is like at least the third year of us doing this. And I think it's always, I think the feedback you guys always give me that it's like, one of the most helpful sessions that you guys have in the recruiting cycle. So, you know, I think that's well, happy to do that and kind of our partnership with the board, and obviously. So, yeah, no worries. So do you want to give folks a minute, or how do you want to, or do you want to kick it off?
Perhaps like give people like 3 more minutes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Or 2 more minutes, like to 7:35. Like, yeah. I'm happy to keep admitting people.
Yeah, no worries. Sounds good. And in the meantime, I think a bunch of you guys, I think already here, I'm going to just share my LinkedIn. Feel free to add, connect there, and message, and sort of, if you have any personal questions, I guess we can try to get to those. But I think, feel free to use that channel, obviously, but use this channel as well. As kind of the goal of today's session is to really get everyone up to speed on networking, and really give a primer, right, to the banking and private equity and growth equity recruiting processes that are going on. But yeah, so feel free to use this forum to do that, obviously, but also feel free to connect on LinkedIn to ask other questions. So while we wait, I think in years past we do this on campus and stuff, but if folks have anything top of mind that they want to talk about, we can always answer some of those questions.
Hey, Kaushik, I had a quick question. Nice seeing you again, by the way.
Hey, yeah. See some familiar faces from prior events.
Yeah, I was just curious about what are the common themes you've been seeing from going across different colleges, and what you've kind of learned are the common questions and the common advice you think would help everyone out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think the biggest points that I'm seeing this, I mean, I think it's always true, but this year has been networking. Maybe 3 thematics. I think for our underclassmen, sort of freshmen, sophomores, it's sort of figuring out where they're going to do their sophomore year internships, and then closely followed up by having to recruit for the same time for junior year internship. So I'm happy to go into some of those kind of strategies that we're seeing there. That's the first probably big theme. The second one is just networking, not getting, I would say people are getting pretty good response rates, but sort of what to do with them, right? Like, how do you make that impact at the beginning? How do you get people to start responding to you? And then what do you build off of that? It's probably a second theme. I think with our upperclassmen, really, because of how early recruiting was, sort of how to maximize their second, third, and fourth years is a big theme. We're doing separate events for our upperclassmen on sort of thinking about your career for the first 5 years and things like that. So I think we got a lot of questions around that. People go into banking or private equity and then don't love it, or love it a lot, but don't like the industry. So how do you think about recruiting again, or kind of that 3-year thematic is what I'm seeing at the upperclassmen level. And then sort of external forces, right? Like what's going on within banking, private equity, and there's a lot of interest now in growth equity, venture capital. So how do you break into some of those industries early in your career, and really building those skill sets? So I'd say that kind of the main thematics that I've been seeing across all of our universities, which I would presume is somewhat similar to some of the things that folks here are going through. Cool, good question, Akash. Nice to see you again. I think a lot of familiar faces here from last week's banking, or the TPG event, and the prior week's Goldman event, and the Houlihan and Evercore restructuring event. So I'm happy to kind of see a lot of those familiar pen faces. But okay, Frank, I'll turn to you to sort of kick it off.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight's event with Kaushik and the Elevate Career Network. We're really glad to have him speak about investment banking and private equity and networking and recruiting regarding those two industries. He has a lot of experience in those two industries and is such a great speaker in terms of all of these topics. So I'll just turn it over to you.
Yeah, amazing. First of all, the Wharton Undergrad Finance Club and other entities, right, that sort of go into putting these things together. Two things. One is since 2012, when I started at Goldman, I'll go back to my story in a second. I've since 2012 at Goldman investment banking and then private equity since, kind of seeing recruitment across all these different venues for analysts, associates, et cetera, as well as with Elevate, where now we're partnered with about 100 of these clubs. I will say that, the Wharton's Undergraduate Finance Club is one of the, the WOOF is like one of the really, really awesome and one of the top clubs that I've had to work with Frank and team in prior years, the prior leadership and before that. And a lot of my leadership from, 2019, 2020 are now some in banking, and now they've already even gone into private equity. So it's kind of the trajectory and sort of track record is there. So I'd say great job on all you guys of getting involved in these types of things. That's probably the first thing I'll say. And then number two, so get involved more. And then sort of, Frank and his team, I've gotten to know Frank actually really well in the last year. Fantastic job. And Wharton is such a great, feeder program into these different careers in finance or business. But I think a lot of it really starts with, your own self-introspection. I think that's something that I've always talked about at these different sessions on how to do that at the beginning. So let's jump in. I have a bunch of slides that I usually present, but folks should definitely feel free to stop and ask me questions and so on and so forth. And we'll try to cover a lot in today's session. So you can raise your hand, put your questions in the chat. I know there's already a few questions that come in on hard skills, soft skills, all this stuff. So we'll get into a lot of that stuff. So let's just get started, guys. Frank, can you see my screen or no?
It's like currently loading, but should be soon. Okay, now I can see it.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, excellent, guys. So let's sort of dive in. First things first, my background. I've spent since 2012 actually in private equity, investment banking private equity. I started my career off at Goldman Sachs in our investment banking group. I was actually very fortunate. I joined GS a couple years after the financial crisis. And for me, what industry group I wanted to start out with was pretty apparent to me. I wanted to get into financial services, financial technology, because that was the industry that was being the most transformative, right? Transformed. And I actually, when I look back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made to start off my career. And so I started at Goldman Fig, which is actually, also an amazing training ground, right? For as a junior professional to get a lot of deal experience, et cetera. I was increasingly fortunate because I got to work on 3 of the largest deals ever in the industry, the first 2 or 3 years, in banking. Again, I highlight this a lot for our incoming bankers. And certainly as you guys are going into the whole recruiting process, try to go to a platform, try to go join a group and an industry group, but also a functional group at a firm that has a lot of deal activity. The reason I say that is because, so much of your formative years is around getting a lot of great deal experience. So that's probably the first piece of advice I'd give you guys. Then after a couple of years in banking, I think, one question that I know a lot of you all are gonna face is sort of what do you do with that, right? And for a lot of people going into investment banking or consulting, and also to an extent like private equity these days, but ends up being sort of a way to preserve optionality for other things that they may want to do in their careers. So I decided to transition to private equity. I joined actually Goldman's own private equity fund, which is about $100 billion fund within the firm. I joined as an associate, made vice president in about 6 months or about a year, I think. Or less than a year. So that, again, covering financial services, financial institutions, financial technology. One thing, maybe my second lesson here is that you'll find careers these days are very, very specialized. In other words, great, you can go become a generalist, M&A banker or generalist, whatever, but you'll notice these days most of the banks and that you're recruiting to, and even private equity firms, 80% of the roles are specialists, right? So you go place into healthcare investment banking or, consumer retail investment banking, industrials investment banking, energy, financial services, technology, media, telecom. So I think, it's sort of imperative for you guys to start thinking about already, what are the industries that are really exciting to me, and sort of, go down that path. For me, financial services, financial technology has always been interesting. And so I went into that kind of industry investing field there. Then a few years as a VP at Goldman, I then got an opportunity to join another fund, Vardy Partners, as a director. This was still sort of in my late 20s. And they were like, hey, you want to come help sort of grow our global private equity business. And it was sort of, an opportunity that you can't turn down. Maybe that's the third lesson learned here that I'll get to, is that you're going to get a lot of looks, especially, you all go on become analysts at great firms. You'll have a lot of different opportunities in terms of exit options, right? So there's an on-cycle recruiting process. You'll go through that, or you'll go through an off-cycle recruiting process. I think it's really important to sort of have sort of an idea of what you want to get out of a certain platform, and sort of, search after those opportunities. And a lot of our bankers feel like, hey, I need to take the first opportunity that I get. And that's not actually true. The most of our successful private equity and growth equity venture capital associates now have been pretty thoughtful about, hey, what is the type of fund I want to join, right? What is the type of work I want to do? What stage of investing do I want to get into? What, industry, or what, type of fund size, who's my end market, B2B, B2C, like what are the things I'm really, really interested in? And that has actually helped a lot of our people become more successful early on. So maybe that's my third lesson learned, is be very thoughtful about what firms you guys join, especially after your banking career. So anyway, transaction experience. I know I get a lot of questions asked about leading transactions, et cetera. Again, I mentioned this earlier. Your primary goal as an analyst is to work on all these transactions. But one thing I would start doing as a first year or second year analyst is start leading these transactions to the extent that you can, right? So do the job of your associate, do the job of your VP. And for me, that included sort of, leading the largest IPO since Facebook, which is Synchrony. We split it off, which is about a $20 billion split off. A couple of years later, which we don't have to get in the mechanics of it, but effectively is like a way to divest part of a company in a sort of in a public market. And then I also led for GS the divestiture of G Capital, which is a $500 billion entity that we ended up having to divest post-financial crisis. Again, people have questions about these deals. I'm happy to go into it. Strategic rationale. What do we do? What do you actually do day-to-day in banking, et cetera? So we'll come back to that. And also the other thing I will say, maybe my lesson number 4 for you all as we kind of go through this, is take on leadership roles. I mean, it's excellent to see Frank and team here kind of evolve into leadership roles, through your career at Wharton. But I would say that holds through at your career if you join, Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or whatever. And I think it's important, right? Because one, it really increases your profile. I will personally say taking on some of these leadership roles you're given, and the way you're given these roles is you do a good job, right? If you do a really good job as a banker or investment banking analyst or associate, the senior people will notice and they'll say, hey, we want you to take this X, Y, and Z leadership role. So generally I would say do a good job in what you're doing, but also try to sort of take on these roles. Yes, it's a little bit more work, but the reputational impact of this and sort of how close you get to the senior leadership, how much you get involved in strategy of the firm, and how many opportunities actually gave me, right? So I got the role of sort of asked to be sort of chief of staff within our investment banking group in FIG. And so what that meant was, leading recruiting or leading people development, leading summer offer committees or promotion committees and so on and so forth. And that's actually like a really cool leadership experience. In banking, consulting, PE, you don't get a lot of leadership experience. You get a lot of deal and sort of that experience, but you don't get a lot of people leadership experience. So my 4th lesson for you guys all here is take on leadership roles. One, it increases your profile. Number 2, it builds your reputation. Number 3, it's on the margin, gets you to become a better performer at the firm. And number 4, gives you an opportunity to really build your leadership and management skills that otherwise, you may get to become an associate or, the number one gripe from all of my associates, and it's why they all kind of end up thinking about going to business school, is they're like, hey, I know how to sort of work in this diligence context, or I know how to work in a deal context, I know how to build a model, but how do I lead a deal team? How do I lead the bankers? How do I lead the, legal work stream? How do I lead this, et cetera? And that is actually a skill that's really, really hard. Because a lot of our bankers end up being so detail oriented that they kind of just want to stay in the model and just stay there all day. Again, we can get back to that concept later. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today is going to be driven by that experience sort of in those leadership roles. That brings me to the next thing, Elevate, which is why we're here. We're obviously partnered with Wharton and Wolf and some of the, a lot of the clubs on campus. Look, one thing I will say, right? Going through the industry, I've been very fortunate to sort of, be able to become in a position to get a lot of the things that have wanted to get done already. But one thing I distinctly noticed that was missing in the industry was sort of an ecosystem, call it a network, call it, an ecosystem, I suppose, or a platform where a lot of our professionals, right, within private equity, investment banking, venture capital, growth equity, hedge funds, fintech, et cetera, could really come together and grow throughout their career, right? So you can go to business school or you can go to a bank and a PE firm, but there is no network where you can kind of grow together. So I just decided to embark upon this in 2019. So kind of 2+ years ago now. And I didn't really quite expect this. Frank knows a lot of the story behind this as sort of he's been involved, but it's now the largest network of professionals and students in these careers, right, in North America. And actually now we're working with, Europe and other geographies as well. So there's sort of a couple different angles here, which we'll get to later with you guys. But one is a networking platform where it's called Connect, where you guys, all of our students and, a lot of your leaders have been part of this. You really have an opportunity to network with other of our 100 clubs and other 30, 40 universities, other firms, all the professionals, and really build your network, right? To me, network has been a social currency, a professional source of capital. And that's what we wanted to build for the next generation, because it's way too hard in this industry to build personal professional networks, which I think is actually crazy, because that's what actually matters in this industry. So we'll get back to that in a second. So it's called Connect. We're now on a wait list. I think you guys will get information on this over the next couple of weeks as we get people off the wait list. I know a lot of folks on here have already been in Connect meetings. So, and I think it's been a great experience. There's learning and events. I think we have the largest selection of the top firms and professionals you'll ever find. Kind of every single top firm you'll find on the platform. Again, you've already been to a lot of these events. More to come on this. We have a recruiting platform as well, where we really work with a lot of the top private equity firms and investment banks to sort of help them, find great talent, but also our students get access to a lot of these great opportunities in this industry, which can be a little bit, who knows who, or you have family in this industry, et cetera. I really want to democratize access to all that stuff. We have an investment platform as well for our private equity professionals, which is less relevant for you guys. Like I said, partner with a lot of the top firms and professionals, and about 100 clubs. When I think a year ago, we were at like 30 clubs. So it's sort of just growing really, really fast. Give you a sense of all the universities and clubs we're part of. Also on the business school side, again, more to come on that. An example of the different firms you'll see, again, I would say over 100 of the top firms we've kind of had on in one way or the other, professionals. Just some examples of events. I'll put this in the chat if you guys are interested. I think it's a great platform to check it out. And then, yeah, let's get kind of continue down this path, I guess, of careers. I think I want to cover 4 or 5 different things after Elevate for you guys. The first is sort of finding the right career in finance. I think from the signups, we found, I believe there was about 60% of you guys are sophomores. I think about 15, 20% are underclassmen or freshmen, and about 25-ish% are, juniors and seniors. So I'll try to be very expansive in this whole thing. It's kind of a journey from, internships all the way to sort of full-time. Look, at a high level, you guys probably know some of this already, but, there's the 5 main, and this is sort of the 5 main careers I get asked about when we do these sessions, or even on Elevate, when we see kind of 20, 30,000 students every year, kind of the careers that they go into, right? Number 1 is investment banking. I know the vast majority of you all are probably, or not, maybe not the vast majority, but I'd say about 50 to 60% of you all are probably going through the investment banking process as we speak. What is investment banking? I spent my first 2.5 years of my career, 3 years of my career there. The crux of the job is client advisory. So you're hired, right? Me at Goldman, we were hired by GE Capital. We were hired by whoever to give them strategic advice on financial transactions. You get to work on complex deals. You build a deep financial skill set. There's a little bit of a less. So what's a big con in this? There's a little bit less of an operational focus, and there's also a little bit of less of like in-depth knowledge that you get in this industry. Again, we'll come back to this in terms of pros and cons. Again, on the right is all the different, those are just examples of firms you can go and listen to on Elevate in terms of, professionals and firms from I think we have like 500 videos, and you can go listen to all these folks into like what is interviews like, what is working there like, and so on and so forth. The second thing is private investing. I'd say about 25% of the Elevate audience across all of our universities goes into private equity or private credit right out of undergrad. Crux of the job here is thinking like an investor, or investing like an investor as an owner in a private capacity, right? So you're not trading stocks, you're investing in private companies. How do you do that? You sort of develop a thesis, you develop a point of view, you do a ton of great diligence, and then you put together a growth plan or sort of an operating plan on what the company would look like under your ownership. Again, in this, it's a little bit different. In investment banking, I think you might, as an analyst, your first year, you might do something like, 5 to 10 deals, just in the course of a year. At any given point in time, you may be working on 3 to 4 transactions. But in private equity, you may be looking at a lot of things, but you might do 2 to 3 deals a year, but you'll go a lot deeper, right? So you're saying, hey, I want to make an investment in X, Y, and Z company. Let me sort of spend 3 months on understanding kind of what is that company all about, because now you're putting your capital to work, or your firm's capital to work. The key here, we'll get into sort of private equity recruiting, I'm sure later, is to really find the right fit fund for you, and also understand if you want to go into PE right away or sort of go into it after banking or consulting, if this is something you want to do. The third area, which is an offshoot of private equity, is growth equity, venture capital. I would say about, again, half of our interest in the last couple of years in private equity has been in growth equity. So a lot of the top firms, right, Warburg or Blackstone and KKR, they have reasonable growth equity arms. And so this is investing in companies, whereas private equity is majority stake, growth equity is sort of minority stake, usually. And it's also earlier stage, right? So whereas private equity, you're investing in established companies, growth equity, you're establishing an early stage company, series B, C, D, E. And so in some sense, you have to take a little bit of a growth angle where not all the data is out there yet. Again, we'll get back to this in a second. A lot of the growth equity jobs for you guys, other than sort of the top firms, I think you might get a good mix of sourcing, even as an analyst or an associate. So just be aware of that. And then there's public investing. I'd say, another really, really popular area for our students. The crux of the job here, right, is to find an edge when all the information is public, right? So how do you do that? Again, you can go back. We've had on, I think, multiple speakers from folks like Citadel, Bridgewater, all these guys. And generally, the key is how do you find that edge and what do you actually do? Obviously, there's a huge data component these days to this. There's a lot of, computer science, data science, and programming that's associated with that these days. But again, that's sort of on the public investing side. And then finally, corporate consulting, corporate strategy, or corporate M&A. I kind of bucket these things together. Obviously, they're a little bit different. In consulting, all three of these are sort of strategy and operations type roles. Again, if folks have questions on that in specific, we can get into that. So the next thing I want to hit at, the next question I get asked from folks, by the way, I do talk fast because I just generally like being in the industry so long, you just tend to sort of try to get as much done as possible, I guess. But number two, I also feel like we have a lot to cover today. So if you guys want me to slow down, just ping me or Frank in the chats. Or if you have questions, stop me or stop us, and then we'll get into that, okay? So the further thing is, today I'm not here in a recruiting capacity. I will be back in a recruiting capacity, but I think you guys, we're here in an informational capacity. So there's no question silly or, I know it's a large group, but, don't be too stressed out about sort of asking kind of questions that you might want to get answered. So just raise your hands or put it in the chat. What are the things that's important for everyone? First year, right? We kind of covered this earlier, career exploration, self-exploration, really important. I think this is the thing that a lot of our first years neglect to do early, which is okay. Like you're early, you're young in your careers, it's not the end of the world. I think you will find that your careers are sort of a marathon. And the reason why they're a marathon is because they transform over time, right? Just like I give this example, right? You got into Penn and that was an amazing sort of thing for everyone here to get into. And that was your goal coming out of high school. But once you got to Penn, you're like, okay, how do I leverage and use this platform to do the next thing, which is, whatever it is. So that's kind of the approach in your career, right? So the goal in your career is to really become the best at something and sort of build your legacy around that. So why do people go into careers like banking or PE or consulting, et cetera? Because it's really giving them a skill set that will then help them, number one, credentialize themselves. Number two, give them a lot of great experience in a short period of time. But also number three, give them more of an exposure into what are the things that really drive me? What am I really, really good at? So I want you all to take that mindset into every single year, every single internship, every single class even that you're taking at Penn, because I think it's just so important. Because I'll just give you guys this. We, as much as we work with the UPenn undergrad, we're also partnered with all the top 10 business schools like Wharton and all the other great business schools. And I speak to them as well. So think of you all, but sort of 6 years down the road, 6 to maybe a little bit longer. And we get asked the similar types of questions, right? Hey, now I've done 2 years at Morgan Stanley, then I went to 2 years at Blackstone. Now I'm at Wharton or HBS. Now what do I do with my career, right? So the sooner you guys can all start thinking about that and building those data points, the better off you are. So that's what I mean when I say your career is a marathon, is the sooner you all can discover that and sort of really become good at it, the less time you will waste sort of having to discover that over time. But again, it's all about, getting experiences, but at some point you want to start thinking about that as well. Okay, so that's what I mean by career exploration. It's sort of a longer term journey. The other thing is strong performance at university. I can say this for the most part, we all all firms have a generalized GPA cutoff. So just do a good job in school and sort of come under that cutoff, right? So I think it's usually like 3.7 or something like that, 3.6, 3.7. Again, it's not cut and dry, but generally it's a good indicator, right, of kind of how you've been performing. It's not the only indicator. The third thing is on-campus performance. I want you all to be very involved. The reason is this is what differentiates, right? So Akash is here. I know Akash from other things, and other folks are here. But what differentiates Akash from Shannon or some of these other folks is what do you do outside of school, or what do you do in school that really differentiates you? And that's either it's both actually, like club and sort of leadership involvement, and also your work experience. And we'll get to that. As a second year, where you're all at right now, generally it's get your sophomore year internship, network like crazy. Make sure you have 3 to 4, 5 stakeholders that you know or have talked to at each bank that you're trying to get to. And then make sure you have 1 or 2 people that will pound the table for you. Hey, I know Frank. I can vouch that he's fantastic. He's very sort of diligent, very prepared for our meetings, and he kind of shows really well. He's really knowledgeable, and he's really excited about Lazard, right? Or whatever, or Goldman Sachs, or Evercore, or whatever. So I think that's the goal in networking. We'll get to how to get to that goal, but that's the goal I want you all to achieve in networking. When you have 3 to 5 people that you've spoken to at a bank, and then you have 1 to 2 people who will pound the table to say, hey, I want to hire, or I want to bring this person into the process. Then it's sort of the deeper career exploration. I think, we have a plethora of choices in life, in college and in jobs. The goal is sort of, opportunity cost. If you do this, what are you giving up? And are you okay with that decision? Don't do investment banking or private equity because, I spent, I started my career there, or you guys have all these peers, or we bring all these amazing speakers who are doing that. Try to do it because you sort of diligence the opportunities and sort of are feeling like that's the best choice for you. Again, it's sort of it's a dichotomy. I know it's hard for you guys, but I think it's important because you want to kind of make decisions. You want to be in a position to overcome any mistakes you make, but you don't want to sort of do something and then realize 2 years later that, hey, I should have done something else. So just be diligent in your process. Like we say in the investing world, like, the worst type of investment is like you buy a bad company and then now you have to own it for the next like 3 to 5 years, right? So that's like the worst position you want to be in. So similarly, you don't want to get into a career and then now you're stuck for 3 years in something where you could have just sort of, done the diligence early on. It's kind of parallels, I guess, with careers and networking or recruiting. Upperclassmen, I know there's a few of you guys. We're going to have a bunch of panels for upperclassmen in the next couple months, especially we're going to have a private equity panel next month with like, professionals from TPG and like 4 or 5 other big firms. Then we're going to have a venture capital and growth equity panel, which is going to be a lot of the growth equity firms that we're going to have. And then we're going to have an investment banking summer success panel. That's going to be probably in April, May. Again, the key is how do you set yourself up for these careers, both from a summer and then sort of a full-time perspective. Anyway, we'll come back to that. And then analysts and stuff we don't have to worry about. So let's actually, I know there's a few questions. Let me check this. As a freshman. Okay, let me get to these in a second. Okay, guys, I know there's a sort of a bunch of questions. Okay, recruiting, there's 5 pieces to the puzzle. Number 1, university. Penn, I would say about 75% of the firms come recruit at Penn, which is a great thing. And so take advantage of all these sessions. You have all the firms that are coming on campus over the next few weeks. And really take advantage. And the goal, right? What is the goal in these sessions? There's 3 goals. Number 1, get to meet people on the recruiting team. That is where networking starts, right? Networking doesn't start in you. It can, but kind of a more improved version of networking is you go to one of these firm events, you ask a question. Okay, that's a great way. You add someone on LinkedIn afterwards and then connect with them and say, hey, you spoke at the Penn event. I really enjoyed when you spoke X, Y, and Z. Like, if you have 5 minutes, I'd love to get on the phone. Guess what? The success rate on that is like 4, 5, 6 times. You then cold emailing 3 days later. So, it also stands out, right? You'll be surprised when any firm goes to campus or any professionals go on campus. In the audience, I would say, even if it's like 100 people like this or whatever, like only 20% of the people will write an email or LinkedIn message whoever the firm is or the professional and say, hey, thanks for coming out and speaking. And my point is, you don't have to do that. If that's unnatural to you, don't do it. But that's such an amazing way to sort of get your foot in the door, especially when you know only 20% or 80% of your peers are not doing that. But also it's a great way to just connect at that point. And even better than just sending a random LinkedIn request where I have no idea where I met you, is sort of putting in a message saying, hey, Kaushik, I heard you speak at X, I mean, not me, but whoever, right? I heard X, Y, and Z speak at this event. I'd love to connect with you, et cetera. And you'd be surprised how much that is more of a warm contact versus a cold contact, which unfortunately a lot of you guys will also be doing, right, over the next couple months, which is sort of, let's do a laundry list of every single Penn alum that exists at this firm, and then email them or something. So again, that's a little bit of a harder route. So what I mean by university is you'll have a lot of university events, you'll have a lot of these firm events. Try to get to know the recruiting team. Most of these firms, right? I can speak for Goldman. We have school specific recruiting teams, and we also have industry specific recruiting teams. So it's kind of a little bit matrixized, but the goal of the school specific recruiting teams is to identify, out of the 400 resumes that we're getting, how do we get to the 50 higher views, right, that we're going to get? So I think that's sort of the goal. And how do we do that is sort of, if we know someone, like if I can vouch and say, hey, Frank reached out, I had a great conversation, let's put him in the process. Like, I wouldn't even probably, like, if someone, when I was leading the recruiting teams, if someone just called me and said that, I probably wouldn't even look at the resume because someone at the firm has already vouched for someone. Okay. So I think that's why that networking thing is important. We'll come back to networking. Second piece of the puzzle is academic performance. Look, your GPA and your SAT and blah, 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 like you can't control it anymore, right? So you're already in your second semester. It is what it is. Okay. So just kind of own it, I guess. But the bigger thing I think you guys can own is the decisions you're making, right? So what classes are you taking? What major are you taking? Why? Like, what is your rationale behind it? How is it going to help you in this career? So coming up with good, solid experiences and stories to present that. And listen, this isn't just stop in banking recruiting. This is like when we do our buy-side recruiting training for all of our bankers, same exact thing, right? We would ask them, all right, why'd you pick finance, right? Why'd you pick operations, or why'd you pick strategy? Why'd you pick marketing? What is it about it? Or why'd you pick art history? Or why'd you pick, philosophy? So what about it is interesting to you? And the best answers are usually ones that are very well thought out, and ones that sort of show more about yourself and, hey, this is my thought process behind something, right? So again, we'll come back to that interview question in a second. In terms of experience, I think this is sort of a make or break in a lot of cases. And I don't want to put a lot of pressure on you guys. Because I think if you don't have an internship for your summer or yet, it's still only February, you can kind of be on that path. But having one really, I think, can tend to differentiate candidates, right? So in terms of the full time, the summer 2023 recruiting process. And the reason for that is, right, like I said, we get all these resumes, they all look the same, double major from Penn, 3.85 GPA, 15, 20 on the SAT or something. So at some point we're going to be like, okay, what has this person done that shows that they want to work in this industry, or they have some of this experience, or they have some business experience, et cetera. Again, nothing is make or break, team. It's not like, you have to have this or you don't. But as a first year, I think, which some of you are, I would try to get an intern. It doesn't have to be in finance. It doesn't have to be in banking. It doesn't have to be in private equity. If I would just try to get a job at some business or strategy or operating related role for your first year. Your second year, I would say it becomes a little bit more important to try to get a finance job, right? If you want to go into private equity or banking. Again, if you don't want it, that's fine. If you want to go into consulting, then you can do more strategy type roles and things like that. Again, because we want to see sort of what is the relevance of your prior jobs to the job that you have. Again, we'll get into some strategies on how to do that in a second. One really good strategy that I've used a lot and I've told all of our students about is a great way to do this, guys. And you've heard me say this at some of the other events, but just look at where your seniors interned. You're in Philly, you're really close to New York, you're reasonably close to Washington, DC. Like one way to do it is just make a list of every single, PE firm or investment bank or hedge fund that's in a certain AUM, in New York or something, and cold email them and say, hey, I'm Kaushik, I'm a student at X, Y, and Z, and I really want to, I want to see if you guys have internship opportunities, and we'll get into sort of the messaging there. That's number one. Strategy number two is just look at where all your seniors, right? All the folks that are seniors now, where did they intern? All the juniors now, where did they intern their sophomore year? So go through their LinkedIn and figure that out, and then sort of email those firms. Again, my point is be creative in how do you get to some of these roles. Obviously, your career portal has a lot of those, and we're actually compiling a bunch of these internships as well in finance for you guys. So we'll share that with the team as well, over the next few weeks. number 4, networking. I know we got to this already, but or briefly touched on this. Crucial. I think in this industry still, networking is important. Again, it's not like, you got to just make your own path. A lot of people complain, oh, X, Y, and Z is getting all these networking networking opportunities because his mom is in finance or his dad is in finance or whatever. Like, I don't want to hear, we don't, yes, that might be true, but kind of figure out what's going to work for you such that you can get those opportunities, right? So figure out what your formula needs to be in order to get into those networking situations such that you can maximize your chance of success in this process. Again, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions on networking, so we'll come back to that. And then finally, interviewing, right? So this is sort of all the hard work you've done, right? All these firm events you've gone to, all of the great classes you've taken, all of the great internships you've participated in, all of the networking that you've done culminates in an interview, right? It kind of culminates in a networking interview, like an informational interview, or a real interview. So how do you really succeed in that? And I'll try to give you guys a few tips. So, all right, the questions are just kind of piling up. So do you guys want to ask these live? I know you guys just texted me a bunch of private questions. I'm happy to take them, but I think it would be really cool if you guys could ask it live. If not, we'll start. Anyone who wants to? Yeah, okay. Baptiste.
Hi, I had a question regarding, you said it's important to get to know the recruiting team at a specific firm, right? So how do we get to know who specifically is on the recruiting team for a firm?
Yeah, great question. So I do get this question a lot. Really, really good question, Baptiste. So you kind of can play detective a little bit, I suppose. I think the one thing you'll find is a lot of people go into like a shell in the recruiting process and sort of just like put blinders on and they just sort of operate on their own, which is fine. Like, pick your own sort of methodology that works for you. One way, again, every firm is going to be different. Okay, there's firms like JP Morgan, which networking is almost useless, right? So they have like a very specific process that they go in and sort of, do it that way. There's other firms which networking, means a lot. So the one great way to know that is, one is just talking to people who've been through the recruiting process, and which is why we bring back so many of our seniors on a lot of our events to talk about what works for each firm. So for yourself, Baptiste, it's a good question. I would first thing is become very, very organized. So take an Excel sheet. I'm sure you guys are already doing this, but if you're going into investment banking or private equity, just for every bank that you think you might be interested in, I actually don't even think you need to worry about what you think you're interested in. Just go every bank at this point. Just make a separate sheet for each of them and then start listing out every single contact you could possibly think about at that bank. So number one, how to find contacts. Number one, go in and access sort of the networking, the event that people come to, right? So if Morgan Stanley or Evercore or whatever is hosting an event, those are the people on the recruiting team. So you start making a list of that. Then I would add into that any friends within, Wharton Undergraduate Finance Club or other things that you're part of, or anyone at Wharton, reach out to the seniors and say, hey, I noticed you interned at Lazard or Evercore. How did you go through that? Like, were there people on the team that you knew, or et cetera? So you have to sort of dig your way to that data. Like if there was like a spreadsheet, then everyone would just go and like email those people, right? I suppose. So I think number one is people you meet at the on-campus recruiting sessions. Those are usually the people on the recruiting team. Number two, talking to your seniors. They will tell you, hey, for JP Morgan, don't even worry about it. Or for, Goldman, do this. Or for Credit Suisse, do that. And so I think, just getting to know that is also really, so that's my second suggestion. And then the third is, once you start meeting with bankers, I'd start with first year or second year analysts. I usually say second year analysts because they're a little bit freer. My first years right now, who were, basically you guys, but 3 years ago, are getting slammed across the board, right? And so in terms of there's maybe only 15 to 20% of them that have been able to even go out to campus and do recruiting sessions, just because how busy the industry has been this winter. So I would start with their first year, second year analyst and see if you can get them on the phone, and then sort of ask, have a good conversation with them. And then towards the end of the call, say, hey, who else from Wharton should I be meeting, right? Or is there anyone else on the team you recommend I meet? Or I've met with, X, Y, and Z people, is there other people on this group or this team I should meet? So Baptiste, a little bit of like a, putting the piece of puzzles together. But as you make your list, right, I want you to organize your list as follows. I want you to sort of start with summer analysts or Wharton students still. Then I want you to go to kind of first year analysts, second year analysts, associates, VPs, MDs. And I really want for every bank for you guys, to, excuse me, be very creative in getting more and more people on that list. Because your funnel obviously works. You reach out to 50 people, 20 will read your email, 10 will respond, 5 will set up a Zoom, and then 3 will actually get to the Zoom, right? So just the funnel is so difficult at times, especially with, 100 plus of you guys showing up to events like this and recruiting. It's just really hard for professionals to do that. So the more touch points you have, almost the better it is. So is that helpful, Baptiste? I try to be pretty holistic in that summary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. I have a quick follow-up question. Do you think it is useful networking with HR as well as they do the first screening sometimes, or not at all? Oh, I think you're muted. So
sorry, there's I was drinking tea and then something's stuck now. So I'm good. So the HR question. Okay, I get this asked a lot. Okay, so hold on one second. Actually, before we jump to that, a bunch of you guys had some questions. So let me actually just share a couple links, because I think a lot of you guys, let me just share these things. But Baptiste, I'm gonna get your question in a second. So I think a lot of you were asking how do you get to the old events and stuff? I'll point to that in a second. I'm actually gonna show you the academy in just a second. It's gonna be it's gonna almost blow your mind. But I think Baptiste, to your question on HR, I would say minimal at best. In other words, HR is great in terms of organizing these events and sort of getting you kind of access to that and all that stuff. But in terms of decision-making, my experience has been, the bankers really drive a lot of that. So when you again, I'll take you guys behind the scenes again. So when we got a resume book from a Columbia or Chicago or UPenn or Harvard or any of these universities, we get 300-400 resumes, right? For summer internship role. We would have maybe at the end of the day, 6 to 7 spots for a particular school, given sort of all the parameters considered, right? So let's say our analyst class is 200 people, right? And I think so, and it has fluctuated over time. Here now it's a little bit more, but let's say it's about 200 people across all the different groups. I mean, you can argue there's probably 10 spots per school, right? Kind of on average. And so to get to that, we have to go through 300 resumes. And so it's usually the bankers, right? So the analysts, and this is another hidden benefit of getting to know people on the recruiting team and the analysts, because those are the people go through the resume book. So if I saw Baptiste, I'm just giving an example here, Baptiste's resume in the resume book, be like, oh, I spoke to him, or I saw him at this recruiting event, or he reached out to me on LinkedIn, or he did this, or he did that, or, Shannon, she did this, or she did that. It just resonates more. So generally the decision, I'm not going to say it's impossible. They can get you into processes when it sort of, you may be behind, or you may want to get sort of, a lot of push. But generally, interviews are done by bankers. Screening on resume books usually done by bankers, except for a few very, very small, very, very boutique-y firms, that sort of has a huge presence on HR. And some of these are also becoming a little bit more they're running all these algorithmic based things on your resumes and things like that. So I would say, look, HR is good contact to have, but I would prioritize 80% of your networking on bankers or PE people, because I think those are effectively the decision makers in the process. HR is great. I'm just saying, after a certain point, it's usually the bankers that are making the decision. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, wow. So many questions. So before even I get to these questions, I just want to point out one thing, guys. I think I really want to share this resource with everyone here. Our team is still working on it, but so let me know if you cannot see my screen again. I think you guys are gonna like this. So this is something our team put together. Can you see this, Baptiste and guys, team? Okay. So all right, we're gonna we're working on a filter mechanism here where you can screen by firm, but I think it's just been so helpful. Over the last year and a half, we've had on literally, I would say over 100 professionals from all these different firms. So if you are interested, let's say in Warburg, as an example, I'm just giving you an example. Go in here and, it takes you to YouTube. But my point is, you can go in here and click on it, and in 2 to 3 minutes, really hear from professionals. If you're Carlyle or KKR or TPG, again, these are just the private equity firms. But if you keep going down the list, I think you're going to see, these are more private equity firms, but I think you're going to see more banks at some point. Whatever. I think we have 14 pages or about 200 videos for a firm like Goldman. So my point is, go in there and sort of figure out what these firms are looking for, right? So, hey, I have an interview at TPG. What is the overview of the firm? Let me go hear from people. The goal really, guys, in this was to, again, super democratize access to, I think there's just a lot, but this one is Hellman Friedman, Goldman Sachs. So we're going to put a filter in, but the whole purpose in this is to give you guys all the skill set that you need, because I think it's woefully underrepresented, like all the things you guys might want to be prepared for these processes or just careers in general. So I highly recommend you guys can take advantage of this resource and over time. So anyway, there's about 500 videos, usually about 2 to 3 minutes each. And they just go over things like interviews, recruiting, networking, career progression, firm overview, all that stuff, such that you guys will be more prepared for your interviews, right? So that's the goal here. So anyway, that was something I wanted to point out to. A few more questions. I do want to go back to the slides in a second, but are there any burning questions that people want to get to? Let me just look through the chat here. Of the three or four contacts at each, do you guys want to ask these questions? Gabriella, Noah, Cameron.
Yeah, my question was, out of those 3 to 5 contacts at each firm that you mentioned, could they be first to second year analysts, or are you looking more for MDs, VPs, associates?
Good question. Really good question, Gabriella. I think, okay, so now there's tricks to the trade here. MDs have a lot of say in the process. However, getting an MD on the phone or on the Zoom, and then further, like, being like a really good impression, and then, getting them through the process, is also really, really challenging, right? So I would say, in terms of allocation of your time at the beginning, I would spend 70% of your time with analysts, because there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, at the beginning, you're not going to be like really, really awesome at networking yet. So like just getting those kinks out of the way, right? You don't want to get on the phone with an MD and just completely blow it, and then they like blacklist you or something, right? So again, it's not going to happen, but just to prepare yourself and sort of be more prepared. And then number 2 is your hit rate's just going to be a lot higher with analysts, right? So if you reach out to like 15 analysts, especially Penn analysts, they know what shoes you've been in, right? So like I said, all of my Penn analysts from 2 years ago are now bankers. So, they know, and they come on Elevate and they do all these things because they know the things that you guys are going into. The challenge that they have is there's way too many of you guys reaching out for them to justify spending, 15 minutes with every single of the 100 people, right? Or whatever that are going through the process, or 200 or whatever. So my suggestion there is making the email, make them want to respond back to you. So versus, I'll use an example here of, Baptiste, I'm gonna use this now since you asked the last question, or Gabriella. Instead of Gabriella, like, I don't know anything about you guys, but I think, you say, hey, I'm Gabriella. I'm a second year at, Penn, really interested in Goldman Sachs. I would love to sort of get on the phone with you or whatever. I know you guys aren't going to do this, but that's a very, blah email. Like I could copy and paste Gabriella's name with Baptiste, with, Frank, with all of the folks here. So tell me more. Hey, I noticed you, we're in, WUFC. I'm also in WUFC. Or I noticed you were in Wharton Women. I'm in Wharton Women. I noticed you, were a swimmer in high school. I too was a swimmer in high school. Whatever your connections are, let's make that. Number 2, give them a little bit more about, hey, I interned last summer, X, Y, and Z. I'm really interested in healthcare. I noticed you're in healthcare investment banking. I'd love to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes just understanding the types of deals that you work on in healthcare. And because I'm interested in healthcare, I've been, focusing on X, Y, and Z. I interned at Biogen last summer. Like, that's already making me want to respond to your email a little bit more. Again, keep it 4 lines or 5 lines or smaller. So that's the number 1 trick, right? The number 1, make them want to respond back to you. And so that you do that by connecting with them. Number 2, really, really important is following up. I would say the first email you send, 20% or less response rate. Second email you send, follow up, 40% response rate. Third email you sent, within reason, don't like bomb people. But if you send a third follow up, I'd probably say that goes up to 60%. Again, there's still a 40 to 50% not response rate, but I think the biggest fear people have is following up. So I definitely recommend you following up. Again, if folks have questions on emails and networking, we may not have time on this call, but you could reach out afterwards or do that. So Gabriella, so back to your question, analysts, higher impact, slightly lower impact, higher touch points, and then sort of ability to do a lot more. So cover a lot of ground. MDs is kind of like needle in a haystack. You reach out to 5 or 6 or 10 of these MDs, one will even respond, but then having a good connection or hook, really important. And if an MD likes you, they kind of will then also introduce you to more people on the team and have them go through the process. So I'd say do a mix of both. Initially start with 70% analyst associates, then gravitate to associates, then start including a few more VPs. But still, I think along the way, 10 to 20 to 30% UPenn MDs or Wharton MBA MDs, you'll have a much higher hit rate on. Gabriella, is that helpful?
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you.
Of course. All right, we'll keep quickly going through these. Where can I find the, okay, yeah, okay, I'll send you guys where to find the recording. In terms of getting to know people at companies, do you have any suggestions for how to initiate second and third meetings? Okay, is there sweet, okay, it's a good question. So you have a meeting with someone, and then what happens then, right? You kind of talk to them, and then that's it. So there's a couple of things you could do. Number one, my suggestion is always take notes. So no matter how, dull or boring or not interesting or not, helpful it was, write down what they wrote. And then what you should do, again, I'm not trying to make it a formula, but I am kind of making it a formula, is that, like, write them an email that says afterwards, hey, Kaushik, I great conversation with you. I really resonated with your advice on sort of following up with people after conversations or connecting with people on X, Y, and Z. I'll be sure to do that. And if you don't mind, I'll keep you, posted on my recruiting process. You can also end that as your call, right? Summarize the call. Hey, it's great to meet you. I really appreciate your advice on X, Y, and Z. It would be great if we could stay in touch and I could keep you, updated on my progress. The other way you could say is, hey, I really enjoyed this. I really have enjoyed all the people I've met with at Goldman in the healthcare group. Is there anyone else on the recruiting team I should be talking to, or et cetera? So there's a couple different ways you guys can do that. In terms of follow-ups, if you write down the things that they worked on, maybe deals it's working on, et cetera, make sure you put alerts in your computer or just research these industry news. And every month or every 2 to 3 weeks, you can send them an email saying, hey, I know you're working on, the health, and this is why the industry stuff is more important. So if you like an industry, you can email them, say, hey, I noticed this deal was going on in the industry. I noticed Goldman advised on it. This is super cool. I think this is cool for these X, Y, and Z reasons. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of flag that to you. And my recruiting process is going really well. I've met with X, Y, and Z people at Goldman. I'm going to keep in touch with you. So just finding ways to add value, or if you get a summer internship, right? So if between now and when you speak to them, if you end up getting a sophomore year internship, email them and say, hey, Kaushik, great to meet you. Just as an update, I ended up getting an internship at X, Y, and Z firm. Super excited for it. I continue to go through the recruiting process, and if you have any time in the next, 2 weeks, I'd love to get back on the phone and just update you and ask you a few questions. So again, it's formulaic in that sense, and that you guys can go back and do this, but just do it though, because the last thing you want is email someone or get on the phone with someone in March, and then the recruiting process isn't in July, and then you are scrambling in June because you know that the deadline's coming up and you haven't spoken to someone. So just treat this as a relationship that you can cultivate over the course of time. Again, you don't have to get on the phone with them every month, but just keep them abreast of things you're working on or things you're seeing in the news. And look, if they ignore you, they ignore you, but at least it sort of keeps you in the process. Wow, the questions, there's just so many questions. Can you guys start asking these questions live? Because I'm getting all these direct messages and it's hard to keep track. Okay, let me go back up. What about conducting research during your freshman year? That's fine. I think, look, it's sort of devil's in the details. One is about how do you position that story? Okay, like if you say I did research in healthcare industry, that's an industry I really like and I'm recruiting for healthcare and X, Y, and Z, or I did research in the space and I didn't like it, but I did X, Y, and Z. I got to understand different business models, equity research, et cetera. Or I did some modeling while I was doing these research and I built these DCFs. Great, that's sort of relevant. If it was sort of irrelevant, I guess it says economics research here. Look, I don't know. I always prefer, again, it's all get the best internship you can. I'm not sitting here saying everyone needs to go work at a hedge fund your freshman year summer, your sophomore year summer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm telling you guys is get the best internship you can, however you define it, however it's relevant to the thing you're going to do. Don't, especially if you're a sophomore, don't over-index on sort of that sophomore year internship, because you then lose the eyes off of the prize, right? Because the eyes on the prize is sort of your junior year internship. So I would say get something that's relevant. Spend about 25% of your time doing it as a sophomore. As a freshman, spend a little bit more time. As a freshman, don't settle, right? It's fine. You don't have to work at the best place, but keep networking, keep recruiting, keep trying to find opportunities, and then keep finding a connection. I would prefer if you guys got startup internships or firm internships versus purely economic research or doing a master's class or something. Again, again, it's to each his own. I would get the best job you can or best opportunity you can, and everyone has their own situation. But my opinion is it's easier to build a story around working at X, Y, and Z company that taught me about this industry, and now I'm going to take that and go do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that's sort of my view. Okay, do people want to ask your questions again? Cameron, Noah, Pernil, Xandro, Jacob, Mark, Prab. Anyone want to raise their hands versus me just reading it to a screen? Okay, Prab.
Yeah. So what's like your thoughts on different industries within like finance and like going with relevance over maybe like a more prestigious or larger bank? So like, let's say you had like opportunities in sales and trading at like a middle market firm that's like more well-known on Wall Street versus like an IB offer at like a smaller boutique. What would you kind of think in that like versus like name recognition versus like relevance when it comes to software stuff?
Great question. Okay, really good question, and I'll give you both. Good question, Prob. By the way, I know I say we ask you guys to do this at all of our events, but my team really asks me to do this at these university events. I'm going to put up a link for a testimonial. You guys fill out a five-star testimonial on it and say like, I took this session at Wharton. It helps my team in the long run. Again, it takes like 10 seconds. The link I just put up, it takes 10 seconds. So I'll just say that again, if you enjoyed the session, obviously, do what you want, but I think, it would help us if you wrote obviously, five-star testimonial on it. But Prab, to your question, right? Really, really good question. I think, look, if you want to go into investment banking, generally, I would say I'm making very high level, hierarching sort of statements. You can ping me afterwards on LinkedIn or something if you have further questions. But I would say generally, if you want to go into banking, getting a banking internship is usually, even if it's a less prominent firm, is usually slightly better than going into sales and trading and then transition over to banking. But again, if you want to go into the hedge fund world or you want to go into trading or any of those industries, I'd say going into a more prominent name is fine. Again, it's sort of picking, they're both good options. They both have pros and cons. It's a little bit about how you position it, right, Prab? So when you get to an interview, the first question I'm going to ask is, Prab, okay, tell me what you did over the summer or what you're going to plan to do over the summer. Why'd you pick that internship? So, in the interview world, we're and I say this a lot in private equity, 95% of our job is saying no, right? And again, we want to say yes to candidates, but we're always looking like a very critical mindset of, okay, why did this person do this? Or what is that decision over here? So Prab, we really want to get into sort of why you picked X, Y, and Z. Look, on paper, having a prominent name stands out. But if I think the example you gave me was sales and trading at a prominent firm versus an IB at a less prominent firm. But once you get over, whatever firm, let's say it's sort of Credit Suisse, and then you get to sales and trading, then I automatically recalibrate in my head that, okay, this wasn't exactly like related to banking. So it'll just be sort of a pro and con for me, right? Depends on what else is on your resume. Whereas if you were into banking, it'll probably be a little bit easier story for me to say, okay, like he did banking, he got an internship in banking. It's relevant here, even though it's a smaller shop. And of course, as a sophomore, other than diversity programs, there aren't a lot of bulge bracket investment banks hiring sophomores, right? So you just got to sort of get what you can get at this point. So that would be, without knowing your situation and your career goals, my off the cuff suggestions on that. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to continue on these slides really quickly, and then let me just go through a couple of things, and I will take your questions. And I'm happy to share this, Frank, with everyone after the session, the slides, if they're helpful.
That'd be great.
What firms are looking for: analytical ability, technical quantitative skills, teamwork, leadership, character, interest in finance, interest in markets. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to just kind of leave it there. You are going to be asked to prove this with all of your experiences, right? So whether it's recruiting, whether it's internships, whether it's coursework, leadership, etc. I'll get to interview questions in just one second. Resume building, I touched on this. Again, I have, right? Anyone here, we have 40 seconds, 45 seconds to look at every resume. Think about it. We get 300 resumes, 400 resumes. Physically spending 1 minute on a resume means 5 hours of resume. That's not happening, right? So I think just think about sort of how we do it. We usually split up the resume book into like 2 or 3 different groups of people. We go through it. There's usually 2 groups of people doing the resumes. So really make it stand out, right? So the best resumes or the not so great resumes kind of have a lot of like unnecessary content. I think a really good resume has, okay, boom, 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 3 internships I've done. What did I do? Built a financial model, led client meetings or presented to the CEO or, helped my team achieve X, Y, and Z, right? So really crisp bullets that talk about what you did and the impact of what you did. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving on the resume. Networking, we touched on a lot of this. For me, it's networking is a career-long effort, which is why things like Finect and all these things we build out, just because you get a job tomorrow doesn't mean you're going to start networking. In fact, stop networking. In fact, if you stop networking, then you sort of are losing, you're losing your personal capital, social capital that you're building, right? So it's all about relationship building. It's about building practice. I know many of you have not networked before or are a little, unsure about how to start. I would say preparation, structure in your conversation, and then, strong outreach messages, structure process around it, and then active listening during a call, all important. Interviews themselves. All right, I'm just going to do a high level on the types of questions that we asked. Again, all of this information in this presentation and what I'm talking about and this presentation we'll see is all crowdsourced, right? So these are all from our class of 2019, 2020, 2021, and I guess 22 now. But things that we've all seen in the process. Okay, so this is kind of where a lot of this data is coming from. Tell me about yourself. Perfect your 90-second pitch. Really, really important. Your first 90 seconds almost makes or breaks your interview. So really important to give me the full picture of sort of why you're here. First is who are you? Why are you making the decisions that you did? Why are you here? Why us? So why Goldman? And then why you? So why Baptiste? Why Frank? Why Gabriella? Then a lot of questions around what are your strengths? Again, examples of these are like, oh, give me a time when you kind of had to do this, or, you got to connect these to banking, right? So obviously things like detail oriented or, teamwork or things like that are good strengths for banking. Things like, oh, I'm very independent, which is great. Maybe not so great strength for banking. It depends on how you position it. What are your weaknesses? There's so many different variations of questions. At Goldman, we used to ask these questions like 3 or 4 different ways. Things like, what is your weakness? What is the feedback you've received? What would you change about the way you work? What did your boss say about you over the summer? Where would you improve? So, what's a failure you've had? So just really, really self-awareness important. What are you most proud of? Again, difficult working situations. A lot of situational questions that we would ask. Hey, a client gives you X, Y, and Z assignment. You have 3 other deadlines. How would you manage them? Or a client calls you on a Friday, no one else is in the office. What would you tell them, right? So I think these are types of questions that we try to ask you guys to just understand what your judgment is. How have you handled conflict, complex situations, etc. Technical, again, this is sort of a table stakes for you guys. There's, you don't have to overkill this, right? There's like 1 or 2 like PDFs that you can kind of, and Wharton Undergraduate Finance Club, I'm sure has a lot of these resources. They do a lot of these trainings as well. To me, that's not that important. I'd say when I look back at our GS interviews, and I probably did, over my career to date, probably over 2,000-3,000 interviews, technical is usually only one component. I would say sort of why deals, what deals are you tracking, what industries you're tracking, those are more important on the technical side. Hire reviews, I'm not going to spend time on here because we don't have time. Technicals, I'm not going to spend time on. Private equity, all right, I think we're kind of a lot of stuff. I think the last thing I may want to spend time on with you guys is succeeding as an intern, or analyst. I'll just say this, okay? And then I will take a few more questions that have come in the last few minutes here. Top quality of work, so important. When people ask me, how do you secure your summer offer? Number one, detail oriented. Again, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to send emails out without attachments, with the wrong date, wrong calendar invites, wrong link, wrong this, wrong that. Again, control what you can control, triple check stuff to the extent that you all will be in the office. Go and print out stuff and figure it out, but figure out what works for you. But that's the number one thing that people see. And again, make mistakes, but just learn from them and move on, right? The best analysts that we've had often make mistakes and they just sort of figure out the next time not to do them again. If you're doing the same mistakes over and over again, and that's sort of not, that's not what we want, right? Being ultra responsive. The biggest way to make a good impression is just be responsive. If a VP emails you and says, hey, what's the status on this model? Or what's the status on X, Y, and Z? Best thing you can do, even if you don't have a status, is saying, hey, Sarah, we're working on it. I will check with my analyst and get right back to you. Or something like that, that at least calms them down that you're actually working on this, right? So a big mistake I see our summer analysts do, or even actually some of our first year analysts, is they'll just sit on that email like all weekend because they don't have a status update. And then we'll be here like being like, what is going on with this deal? Because the client's asking for something. So just be responsive. Taking ownership of something. Okay, another great way. I think our best summer analysts were ones that came on and said, hey, they not day 1, but day 5 or day 10, right? The summer internship is a 9-week sprint, right? It's not like you get to sort of spend 3 months just sort of doing whatever you want. Week 1, week 2, you start asking the analyst, hey, can I take a piece of this model that you're working on or a piece of this worksheet, and I want to learn how to do it, and I want to actually do it, and I want to own this, right? So I know it's hard. I know it sounds crazy, and I know it sounds like really, really, a little like intimidating, But the sooner you can do that within something you can do, and then obviously get their help, sort of the better off you are. Communicate with clarity. I think especially, right? And this summer, I remember we would staff you guys on real deals, right? So we at least, you know, when I look back at the GS investment banking analysts that we had, even the summer, we're working on real deals. So it's not like you're put on this like fake projects and stuff like that. So, and you'll be working on 3 or 4 deals, not just one deal. So important is to communicate with clarity and precision, because you're learning the job. But at the same time, you got to be upfront saying, hey, this other MD has asked me to do this. How should I prioritize these things? Last thing you want, and trust me, so many of our analysts do this. And that's why it's on this list, because this is the top 10 biggest mistakes or biggest things I want you guys to do, is that they sort of think if they don't communicate, the problem will go away, and it never does. It actually becomes worse, right? So I think just communicate up front and say, hey, I have 2 deadlines, help me prioritize. Way better than getting to Friday and then just having one project done, and then the other MD is like, where's my work, right? So something to think about. Offer to help the team. Again, I'm not going to belabor this. It's an obvious point. Try to think outside the box, right? So one of the questions we ask a lot in private equity is not just what the EPS accretion dilution or whatever is, but would you do this deal? Why would you do this deal? What would you do as an investor? So really, really important for me when I interview you guys for private equity, not just tell me like, oh, there was 5 buyers in the process and this buyer paid this and this was 10% accretion and this is the stock price, whatever. I'm going to tell you, step back. Imagine if we were in the process. So how would you think about this investment? What would you tell the investment committee? What would you kind of think about the deal strategy of the deal? That's where I want you guys to get to, right? So get over the minutia of everything you're working on and get to like sort of a higher level. Be positive, be professional. Again, I know it's hard. It's like 10 p.m. on a Thursday. You have plans. It's New York City. Like just, be a good team player. Don't openly complain. Keep your calendar inbox. Okay. Again, day 1, you'll be sitting there. I've seen this. I see this. I've seen thousands, tens of thousands of examples. You sit there being like twiddling your thumbs. Can someone please email me? I'm not getting any emails. Like, I'm not on a team, like blah, blah, blah. Fast forward 2 days, you have 1,000 emails in your inbox because you're on this deal, you're on that deal, you're on this thing, that thing. So the best thing y'all can do early is organize yourself saying Project Falcon, round 1, round 2, buyer emails, whatever works for you. Again, whatever works for you, but be organized, because what'll happen, I guarantee it for every single one in this room, your MD will email you week 6 and say, hey, that buyer sent an email like 3 weeks ago with something like how much, they want to pay for this company. Can you just tell me what that is? And you'll be here being like searching your inbox, right, for Project Falcon, for this, that, and the other. So my point is just be organized. It'll help you so much later on. Calendars also, the biggest thing is like people will be like, oh, I'm double booked or this. So just keep your calendars organized. Be resourceful. Again, I try not to spend a lot of time on this, but I end up getting caught up in this page. So I'll just keep it moving. Again, career lessons learned. I'm not gonna have time for this. So let me end this piece of the presentation. And I wanna take, I know we're a little bit over. Can you guys still see my screen or did I exit out of it? Okay.
I think you exited out of it.
Okay. I will send you guys a deck because I do think there was a lot of stuff in there, but there's also so many questions. Will you please send the PDF? You stop screen sharing. Please send the deck. What's the typical number of calls? Okay. What's the typical number of calls or convos are usually needed to get a referral? Okay. Tough question. It could be 1 or it could be 20 and no referral, right? So it sort of depends on the process. So my key on this is just treat every call professionally like an interview. What that means is prepare, no matter if it's with an analyst or an MD, right? Go in, prepare your story, prepare why that bank, prepare kind of what you want to ask them, actively engage, because you just never know, right? That could lead to so many other things, or it could just fall on its face. The other thing is, don't put so much pressure on yourself to be like, oh, I got to be perfect in every interview. Look, I remember my first bank I reached out to, the person was like, walk me through your resume. And I was like, well, what do you mean? You have my resume. What do you want me to walk through? Right. So I think like, I was completely shy. I was like, and then they were like, oh yeah, do you have any questions? And I was like, no, not really. I think you answered all of them. So all the things you're not supposed to do in an interview, I did. And then obviously never got a call back from the bank. My point is you will have bad sessions. That's totally normal. Just get those out of the way. Okay. So my point on that number of calls is you guys have an internal clock. Like, you guys watch Super Bowl, I'm sure, like you guys have this like internal clock where if you're having a good relationship with a bank or not, right? So if you're getting love, if people are responding to you, like the quarterback's clock or whatever they say, right? So you just be very self-aware, but also be like, advance the ball, right? Don't ever think you're out of the process, right? So just try to keep advancing the ball and saying, hey, I'd like to, this person. And the great thing about investment banking is like, if the school team thing is, or a certain industry group is falling short, guess what? Go to another industry group. So if like, MS, San Francisco Tech was your number one group, and then you just have had no traction, switch to MS, New York Tech, and sort of go about it that way, right? So I think or go to like, TMT or media telecom in New York. So my point is there's enough ways for you guys to get into the process that that it's like, don't ever sort of stop, or don't ever have a glass ceiling about yourself, none of that. Just keep on moving. Okay, I have a board meeting in 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I'm trying to get to all these questions now. What is the typical, would an internship, okay, you guys asked this. How would you keep your network updated? Okay, I answered this. Do you have any advice for student Christian? I'd be not coming from schools not coming from backgrounds without a lot of alumni. I'd say just make your hay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you all have the ability to be successful in the recruiting process. It's on you, because you have a platform at Penn or whatever, whatever platform you have now. Just utilize the platform. I don't want to hear from anyone that there's no alumni or whatever. I guarantee whatever school you go to, especially a school like Penn, there's hundreds of alumni. So just try every day. Wake up with like, hey, I'm going to email 5 people. If 0 people respond, let me key another 5 people. Again, don't just go blindly, like change your message or do something that's a little bit different, but don't be discouraged by the process. Just again, and also don't be so influenced by people around you. Like, I have this interview, I have that interview. That's okay. Like, do your best. And then, there'll be lots of different points. Whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, there's plenty of inflection points where you have opportunities to be successful. So I wouldn't worry about that. In terms of getting to know people from companies, you've suggested how to, okay, I answered all that. All right, so let me sort of go through this, and we could keep going forever on this. So I think my intention here, guys, was to impart as much knowledge as possible to you all in a short period of time at like 100 miles an hour, so that you guys are all successful in this process. I'll take 1 or 2 more questions. A lot of you guys have stayed through the end, actually beyond the end of it. So kudos to you. If you have specific questions, you can obviously message us or me on email or on the thing. But why? Okay. Oh, sorry, Yutong, why don't you ask your question? And then I'm going to share that testimonial link again. Again, do us a favor, go fill that out. Say you took it at Wharton. Do the 5-star thing and just write that you were at Wharton and you enjoyed the session, whatever. And yeah, that's helpful. So yeah, Yutong, you're up. What's up?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving all that genuine advice. I guess my question is, you mentioned how it is really important to know why bank. And I guess when you go into networking calls, sometimes when you ask the analyst questions, the answer could be kind of general about like why they're going to banking. So like, how would you say we can approach the conversation, or what kind of questions can we ask to get the, like why this bank specifically?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Actually, one thing I wanted to highlight is next week, like we had Houlihan Evercore last week, which we're gonna put the recording up of that restructuring session. Next week, we have this like really awesome event that I want to invite you guys out to right now. It's with actually so it's an MBA in private equity and investment banking event. So we're gonna have on speakers from Blackstone, Goldman, TMT, Lindsay Goldberg, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Global Infrastructure Partners. We're also going to have the AdCom from Wharton. They're going to come in and talk about how you think about your MBA and sort of what are they looking for. As you guys know, today's FD rankings, kudos to you guys. Wharton MBA was #1 again this year. So really, like, the goal is we try to use our extensive network to bring on these fantastic speakers and role models such that your process gets easier, because the #1 thing we hear from you guys is it's too opaque, or it's too this, or it's too that. I don't really know. I don't have anywhere to go for advice, whatever. That's the whole point here. So sign up. It will fill up. So we just finalized it. And again, since you guys are Wharton alums or Wharton undergrads, you might actually find this especially helpful. They're going to talk about 2+2. They're going to talk about full-time process, and you're going to hear from professionals. So I just want to point that out. There's also a diversity in recruiting panel we're going to have with the president of Wharton Women, Stanford Women, Duke Women, Harvard Women, Cornell Women, Columbia Women, all of them going to like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Evercore, all these firms. That is being finalized. We will send that out. Again, you don't have to be diversity. You can do it, but especially if you're diversity, check that out. We're going to tell you like how to navigate that process, the whole summer internship stuff. Again, And then after that, the private equity event. So just be in the know, like we send newsletters out, whatever, just be in the know. And then finally the recruiting networking thing. Once the wait list, once your turn comes up, do take advantage and sort of start meeting other people. So Itang, your question around, can you give me a specific example of kind of what you meant by that?
Yeah, so like maybe like when you were talking about Evercore and why you want to go to that bank, like,
oh, like why specific to a bank? Okay, so there's look, yeah. No one's gonna come, like there's a like a balance here, right? Couple of answers for why this firm. One great answer, by the way, I'll give you another cheat sheet. Another great answer is just saying, hey, I've met, 2 or 3 people already from this firm, and I loved, what they talked to us about, how much, especially a boutique bank like an Evercore or Lazard or a Catalyst or one of these banks, you could say the amount of responsibility that junior people get, very small deal teams. Yeah, of course, Frank, you're welcome. The fact that you are sort of like a small deal team in a large deal, getting exposure to large deals, like all these things that you hear from these conversations are a great way. You don't have to make it Evercore specific, but you can just say, hey, I'm looking at mostly boutique banks because number one, I like kind of working in those small group settings. Number two, I like the fact that every single analyst I've spoken to has sort of told me that this is their experience and it sounds really great. One slight key that I will give you there is if you position the answer A versus B. A is, oh, I like Evercore because, I love the small team culture and how much responsibilities analysts get. Versus B, I really like Evercore because every single analyst I've spoken to has really highlighted to me how much like the small team, like they appreciate that. Number two is more effective than number one because you kind of have already linked up your connectivity with people there and the fact that you're kind of translating what you already heard from that bank. Again, I'm only giving one example. There's thousands of examples of this, but these are just sort of tips, tricks of the trade, I guess. As you do more of these networking events, you'll get to know this. But, Yitang, I don't mean like you have to be like, oh, I noticed Evercore has advised on 4 of those 7 largest M&A deals in 2000. Like, I don't mean that. I just mean generally, why do you like the idea of working at this bank? It could be because of people that I met. It could be the fact that I've met a lot of people in healthcare and we've worked on all these great deals over the last couple of years and I've been following this particular industry a lot. And that's kind of what I want to get exposure into. It could be as simple as I like the bulge bracket versus, elite boutique type mentality. So I don't necessarily mean you have to be like super duper specific about a certain bank, but generally it shows that you're interested in a certain place. Virtually the best way to do that is by just talking about people you've met before or deals you've noticed in the market, right? But once you get to that point, be sure you can talk about that deal. So if you say, hey, I noticed you guys worked on these 3 really cool healthcare deals, then I'm going to ask you, what did you like about that deal? What do you think about the industry that it's in, et cetera? So just be ready to answer those follow-up questions if you bring that deal stuff up. Okay, cool. I am 4 minutes late to my other thing. Anyone has any like burning questions that they didn't get to ask? I know I didn't get to a lot of the direct messagings. I apologize. There was just a lot of really good questions. Frank, if people want to send me questions afterhand, please do. I love the energy today. Like, please guys, like this is not the end. Okay. The next 3 months are going to be intense for my sophomores. Okay. But one thing I'll say is you're all kind of in this together, use each other, help each other out, use the larger Elevate platform. So once we open up the Finec thing, you guys will be able to get on and meet other people from, UPenn or Columbia or, other schools and maybe interview prep together. Maybe you guys are both gunning at healthcare. That's the one thing we're trying to get more people into more industry specific stuff. You could do interview prep, etc. Use all the resources that you can, practice a lot, connect with people. The other thing I'll say on networking, let's say you network with 10 banks right now and you get 4 or 5 good banks. You only take 1 offer, okay? So it's not like you get to intern at 7 banks this summer, right? Or PE firms. Guess what happens? If you didn't get into your top firm this summer, what happens is called lateral recruiting at the end of the summer. So the people who are successful in lateral recruiting are the ones who had good relationships from the prior year networking cycle, such that they can sort of leverage those relationships because the lateral recruiting happens like this in a matter of a week or 2 weeks. So if you guys can go back and say, hey, Kaushik, we met last year. I'm still interested in Goldman. How's sort of, I'd love to have a conversation over my summer. And that will lead to a much better, much quicker or much higher ROI result, even if you don't get to your top banks. So that's why kind of networking is important. The other thing I'll say is nothing is the end of the world. Your first job's not the last job. I graduated in the financial crisis, okay? Like a few years ago. And like, it was the worst place to go into kind of the world. But I think I'll end on this topic. The goal in your careers is 3 things. Number 1, find things that you guys are uniquely good at, better than 95% of the world. It could be investing, it could be operating, it could be advising, it could be building, it could be whatever it is, teaching, whatever it is. So key is over your career, become the best at something and identify what that is for you. Number two, be passionate about your interests. So if you love in the morning, I get this asked a lot. Oh, what's the best group to go at Goldman? I'm like, well, okay, so what if I say natural resources? Do you like natural resources? Do you want to spend 2 years as a natural resource analyst? Oh, no, I just want to work at Goldman. Okay, but you just worked in natural resources. I'm giving an example. This could be Morgan Stanley, Lazard, whatever. But my point is, you work 2 years in natural resources. Guess what? You're only going to get NR, mostly get NR buy-side opportunities afterwards. And then now you're 4-6 years into an industry that you probably didn't like to begin with. So my point is, the more you can start identifying your own interests versus saying, hey, I wake up every morning and check TechCrunch. I want to know what's going on in the B2B space. And that's all I spend time on. Again, this is an exploratory process and it'll change. But the sooner you can identify what those interests, passions, et cetera are, the best. So number one, become the best at something over your career. Number two, work in things that you're passionate about. And your password reset option. Okay, we'll fix that, guys. Sorry about that. And then the third thing is define your level of impact. For some people, it's I just want to make the most money I can. Okay, great. That's your impact. Number two, I just want to leave a legacy. Great, that's your impact. I just want to help as many people as possible. I want to work on the most biggest deals in the world. Blah 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 blah. Whatever it is, make sure you guys you guys tap into that as well. Okay, so on that note, I have to go. So I hope this was helpful for everyone. Thank you guys all for staying till the end. I know this has been a long day, a long session. Valentine's Day, all this stuff going on, day after the Super Bowl. So hope everyone found this helpful. And Frank, let me turn it back over to you. I'm gonna put this thing up one last time. Oh, not this thing up, the testimonial thing. I'll send you guys an email with all the slides and stuff. So I guess that's helpful. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. I thank you, Josias, Ashley, Dante, Gabriella, Aaron, all you guys. I appreciate you. And you guys are going to do tremendously. Keep me posted. I want everyone here to come back and be panelists for me next year on whatever Elevate event we're having. That means you guys will be successful through the process and found things you're good at, et cetera. So Frank, I'll turn over to you and best of luck in this process.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaushik, for organizing and speaking at this event. It was super helpful. I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone learned a lot. So thank you so much once again, and feel free to come back to Wharton whenever.
Yeah, I'm actually speaking at the business school in a couple of weeks, but I won't be, it's still gonna be virtual, but anyway. Oh, but yeah, like I said, the Wharton MBA event, definitely check it out. I think that'll be really, really interesting. But yeah, love to, Frank. Great job, guys. I'm Wolf. I'm super, super proud of these guys for building what are very mission-driven organization at Wharton to increase accessibility, to build a better network community, and also to build sort of a platform and a legacy, right, for Wharton and for each other. So get involved, become leaders, make this a better place, and also find your passions. That's the most important thing. Don't go into these things because you want to go into or you want to make a lot of money. That's the byproduct. Just find your passions and become really good at it. Okay. So anyway, I'll let you guys go. I have to go to this next thing, but best of luck, everyone, and stay in touch. Okay. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye.